Murph's here, and today we're going to discuss the 357 Magnum cartridge. We're going to go over some of its history, technical data, turn that technical data into contextual data, and then do a little bit of comparison before everything is said and done. Now, apparently I'm going to have a co-pilot for today's video. I already attempted to start this video once, and the dog also decided that she wanted to co-pilot the video, but she got tangled in the cables for my audio setup here, so we had to restart. The cat has decided to linger, however, so we'll just have to keep an eye on her. Yes, hi Leia. Yes, I know. Much purr. No, stop that. Goodness, it's hard to find good help. All right, guys, so with that, why don't we go ahead and get into a little bit of history into the 357 Magnum cartridge. In 1935, the 357 Magnum was developed by Elmer Keith as a way of spicing up the .38 Special. Now, this was actually developed in direct competition with Colt's .38 ACP, and as a way to be able to defeat body armor and car bodies from this time period. Now, stop chewing on that. Nope. Leia, no. Now, as a way to stop car bodies and body armor. Now, this would actually be chambered in Smith & Wesson's end frame revolver, which was a beefy, heavy revolver for the time period. And this would be something that initially would be a limitation to some law enforcement, because especially for belts of the day, when you're carrying around that large of a revolver, it can really start to wear on your body as you try to go about your daily duties. Now, this would of course cause a bit of an arms race in police firearms development, and you would eventually wind up with lighter frame revolvers produced in the 357 Magnum cartridge, getting all the way down to K-frame revolvers with metallurgy that could actually match the requirements that was needed for them. Now, the 357 Magnum would be a popular police cartridge, but kind of a niche police cartridge. For the most part, 38 plus P would still hold sway. However, the 357 Magnum had a special distinction for being an excellent fight-stopping capable cartridge. Do not fight with me. Fight-stopping capable cartridge, being accredited with many one-shot stops. And it would be utilized by the FBI and many other police departments and law enforcement agencies. Now, this would remain the trend up until the 1990s, when revolvers were heavily getting replaced by semi-automatic handguns. And this was because of a kind of separate arms race in which there was a wider variety of semi-automatic high capacity, or what we would now refer to as standard capacity handguns, out of the market that were kind of having police outgunned with 6-shot revolvers, regardless of how powerful they were. So this would cause an overall trend to go to 40 Smith & Wesson 9mm and 45 caliber handguns in order to effectively be able to win these types of fights. And you would see the same trend occur in self-defense type categories as well. However, the 357 Magnum has maintained a presence in the hunting community, as well as being an effective means to be able to ward off four-legged predators and such. All right, guys, that's pretty much our history portion. Why don't we go ahead and get into the kind of technical specifications, starting off with a little bit of size comparison, because I will frequently forget to do this. On the left is the .38 Special. In the middle is the 357 Magnum, and on the right is the .44 Magnum. Now let's go ahead and describe this cartridge. The 357 Magnum is a round nose projectile, though it can be found in semi-jacketed hollow points, as well as like Hornady Critical Defense FTX, polymer tips. The grainage ranges from about 110 grains to as high as 180, though it's far more common to see 125 and 158 grain options out on the market. Velocities range from somewhere between just over 1,000 feet per second to as high as 1,500 feet per second out of a revolver, and getting closer to 1,650 and higher out of a rifle. So we're kind of getting like 30 carbine type capabilities out of the 357 Magnum. The cartridge casing is straight walled, rimmed, and a center fire cartridge. All right, so that's kind of our technical specifications. Where does our context derive here? Why did the 357 Magnum fall to the wayside? And a lot of this really does have to come back to the, in part at least, to handgun platforms. We wind up talking about handgun platforms a lot whenever it is that we talk about cartridges. And that is because it's a two-part system. You can have the greatest cartridge in the world, but if you're fielding it in a handgun that's not really getting its capability out of it, it's kind of a moot point. So, one of the issues right off the bat is that we have a capacity and reload issue whenever it comes to revolvers. Revolvers are a more in-depth reload, be it through speed loaders, speed strips, or cartridge pouches. It takes more time to reload a revolver as opposed to a semi-auto. Now, there are semi-automatic handguns chambered in 357 Magnum. However, they run into chronic issues with which many semi-automatic and full automatic systems run into with rimmed cartridge casings, and that is reliability. The Conan 357, while a very cool looking handgun, is renowned for not having the best reliability. The Desert Eagle is also chambered in 357 Magnum. However, I'm not too familiar with its reliability capabilities. I've never shot one, nor have I spent a lot of time working with those handguns. So you kind of nullify the advantage when you don't have reliability. It doesn't matter how fast you can reload it. Now you have to worry about how fast you can clear malfunction. In addition to that, whenever we start talking about lighter weight options on the concealed carry market, yes, it's great to have a lightweight option that is easy to carry, but we're still slaves to physics. So whenever you put that 357 powerful 357 Magnum cartridge into a, lightweight snub-nosed revolver, you wind up with a lot of muzzle blast and a lot of muzzle flash. And a lot of this was talked about in my 357 Magnum video that I did some while ago, which was primarily discussing its suitability as a modern self-defense cartridge. A lot of this comes down to how long of a barrel, no ma'am, how long of a barrel am I working with, and how light of a handgun am I working with. Now, there are quite a few people who have responded in there claiming that they still carry 4-inch Smith & Wesson Model 19s or something along that line. However, that's not the norm. That's not the vast majority of people. And those guys, I would challenge to say whether or not they are effectively concealing their handguns. More than likely, their idea of concealment is an outside the waistband holster and like a fishing jacket over top of it, which anybody who knows that that is not actual concealment. It was in the 1980s. It is not considered concealment now. So with that being the case, yes, you have a potent cartridge, but are you actually able to wring the most out of it? Can you maintain recoil management in order to be able to have a multi-shot engagement? Because regardless of whether or not you just need one, you still have to have that one round connect. And if you don't have the best sights, if the handgun's moving around in your hand a lot because you're talking about a very small grip and all that type of stuff, there's a higher probability you're going to miss that first shot. That's kind of strong. Now, when it comes to circumstances that can sustain a larger 357 Magnum revolver, the 357 Magnum is a fantastic choice, especially if you're talking about defending yourself from dangerous game. Depending on the size of the game, the 357 Magnum is more than adequate to be able to meet your needs. And that was actually discussed in a video posted not too long ago. I'll put the link in the description, where I discussed cartridges that I would select for defense against big game. Or dangerous game, I guess I should say in this case. Predatory game, if you will. Alright guys, that is our kind of contextual driven portion of this. Why don't we go ahead, or contextual data driven portion of this, why don't we go ahead and do a little bit of cartridge comparison. Now, a competing cartridge from the time period was the 3844, which was basically a 38 special cartridge that was loaded up with additional powder. Kind of like a 38 plus P, but before 38 plus P was the thing. Now, with this being the case, since we're prior to the metallurgy really getting to the point of being able to withstand these higher pressures from a 38 in the same size frame, Smith & Wesson also chambered the 3844 in its end frame revolver. Now, the difference between a 38-44 and a 357 Magnum, at least visually, is that a 357 Magnum is made to be slightly longer than a 38 Special so that you cannot chamber it in a revolver that is only chambered for 38 Special. You can put 38s in a 357, but you cannot go vice versa. That's very important because the 357 Magnum is producing a lot more pressures than the 38 Special. Same kind of thing with 38-44, but it's not necessarily that much longer. Now, the 38-44 wound up falling to the wayside because it did not necessarily get the benefit of a lot of the same development that the 357 Magnum did. Ultimately, with the slightly longer casing, you could do more with a 357 Magnum cartridge than you could with the 38-44. You ran into a wall at some point. And with advancements in metallurgy, you really didn't need two different cartridges that did the same thing. That being, no ma'am, that being the 38 Special plus P and the 38-44. So the 357 Magnum wound up reigning supreme. So I guess in terms of comparison, we can kind of see where this winds up at. Now, what are my recommendations when it comes to the 357 Magnum cartridge? Would I consider it to be a good duty cartridge for today? And the answer would be no. Even with, products like these with the Wesson Model 686 Plus, which holds 7 357 Magnum cartridges, that's still single-digit capacity, and in a time period in which, police are carrying 19 or 21 round magazines as standards, 7's just not necessarily going to cut it. In addition to that, we're still talking about most likely when reliable platforms being pursued, revolvers, and the trend, the way that we fight and all that kind of stuff we're trained to fight now has gone away from revolvers for that type of use. So I would definitely not recommend for duty use unless I was in Alaska or something along those lines. If I was in or Montana or someplace where I might run into dangerous game and need a more potent cartridge readily on hand. That's not to say that 357 Magnum will not put a threat down, be it human or animal, as much as it is to say that there are some options better scaled to ending a human threat than there are to ending animal threats. Now, when I recommend this for self-defense use, again, it really does come down to the platform. At one time, I had an interest in a 357 Magnum snub-nose revolver, not to shoot 357 Magnum out of it. I was mostly planning on shooting 38 plus P, but so that I could pair it with my Ruger Security 6. That way, I would be able to utilize the same ammunition in either revolver should, for whatever reason, I not have access to one or the other. Had to pass it off or whatever it is that it may be. I wanted to have that kind of flexibility in my system. That's something that I kind of modified over time because trying to be able to fight with a 357 Magnum revolver, snub-nose revolver, in the same way that I would fight with, say, even a 380 compact or subcompact are not really the same. There's a lot more effort that goes into one over the other, and I think I'd rather just stick with 38 at that point. Now, does that mean that I don't recommend 357 Magnum snub-nose revolvers? Yeah, kinda, if I'm being completely honest. Now, platform, weight of the platform, and your ability to be able to handle it are all things that get called into question. But you are going to have to spend more time training with that 357 Magnum cartridge in order to be able to effectively fight with it. And I do mean effectively fight with it. Because training with 38 in a lightweight platform, thinking that you are going to be as equally ready to fight with 357 Magnum is folly. You need to get into that recoil dynamic so that when everything falls apart for you, for when your adrenaline dumps and all that kind of stuff, you are prepared to be able to mitigate that recoil. Nothing can actually, no amount of training can truly prepare you for a fight, but you can still build muscle memory and expectation. So that's something to keep in mind there. What about for home defense type uses? Well, again, it comes back to platform, not necessarily being readily adaptable for lights and stuff like that I would consider to be important for identifying your target in the dark. But if we're talking about just the cartridge, well, yes, sure, it's absolutely adequate to be able to stop any threat that was trying to enter your home. However, you might run into an issue with over-penetration, and that could be problematic if you have neighbors or small, or children, other family members in general living in your home. Well, how about as a hunting cartridge? Be it out of a handgun or a rifle, the 357 Magnum is a time-honored hunting cartridge, and I would 100% recommend it for small to medium game. I also think the 357 Magnum would have a fantastic spot in kind of a utility firearm on a farm, ranch, or even just a large property where you might be puttering about and away from home, where you would still have a cartridge that would be effective for both man and animal should you run into a situation where you have to use them. Now, of course, the cost of the 357 Magnum might make it to where you're not necessarily going to shoot at stumps just because you felt like it, but you would have a more than capable cartridge on hand in order to be able to handle any situation that arose. All right, so with that, what are my uses for the 357 Magnum? Why do I keep 357 Magnum handguns around? Well, I have a place in my heart, a nostalgia for the Ruger Security 6. And I do have a defensive niche for my Security 6. Leia, are you really... Is there any other spot that you can do that at? You're really killing me today. Okay. Everyone's not going to watch you preen yourself. Get out of here. Come on. Silly. All right. Where was I? So, I do utilize my Ruger Security 6 as perhaps a hunting sidearm, or at times I've utilized it as a truck gun. Something that I keep on hand. Oh, yeah. Something that I keep on hand, ready to go so that I can effectively deal with whatever threats might come up at me. Now, there are a lot of other options that I have available for that same type of purpose, but I have frequently utilized a 357 Magnum in that role. All right, guys. I think that pretty much covered my thoughts on this particular subject. I hope you guys found this interesting, and that's pretty much all Leia and I have. Have a good day.